Man, I can't believe Kendrick came at us like that. For real, dog, I might just have to do one of my 7-minute drills just to get back at him. I bet. He's still doing shows but fell off like The Simpsons. Your first shit was classic, your last shit was tragic. He averaging one hard verse like every 30 months. If he wasn't dissing, then we wouldn't be discussing. Yeah. And your arms are short. For the past month and a half or so, J. Cole's been teasing new music with the Might Delete Later IG and YouTube channels. And a lot of people, myself included, assumed that this would eventually lead to the fall off and that the tracks previewed in it were just kind of throwaways or loosies. But I guess I was wrong. Because seemingly out of nowhere, J. Cole released the full project, Might Delete Later, with plenty of responses throughout the project. But let's take a look at 7-minute drill first, because that's what everyone's looking at. And then we can go into the rest of the project. The title for 7-minute drill comes from the mental exercises that J. Cole gives himself. Basically, just do a verse in 7 minutes and, figure it out. Like, basically put it all together. It's a mental exercise. Anyways. He starts off at the chorus where he says, phone call, they say that somebody dissing, you want some attention, it come with extensions. Which is very clearly and very much a direct way of addressing the situation, but also referencing the first-person shooter track by saying extensions, which goes into whole gun bars and stuff. I look having henchmen, if shots get to popping, I'm the one doing the clinching. Essentially, going into that line that Kendrick had about having his bodyguard with him because he's paranoid and afraid because he's lost homies to violence and stuff like that, which reasonable, but he's kind of, I guess, reassuring Kendrick that, hey, don't worry, you'll be fine. It's just me. I'm not going to have anybody sneak up on you. But then we start to get into the verses. And in the first verse, he mentions how Kendrick is still doing shows, but fell off like The Simpsons. Which, is actually interesting because until Drake's It's a Blur tour, the Big Steppers tour was the highest selling hip hop tour of all time. But then Drake's tour did it in half the amount of shows. So that kind of sucks for Kendrick in that sense. But also, I don't know how much Kendrick necessarily cares about sales in that sense. Then later on, or just after that, Cole goes on to attack Kendrick's discography and responds to him saying that your best work is Light Pack with, your first shit was classic, your last shit was tragic, your second shit put niggas asleep but they gassed it, and your third shit, that was massive and that was your prime. And then he goes on to mention how that back then he was still trying to chase Kendrick. He was like clearly behind him, but now he's like, nah, you behind me, basically. Going into the whole discography order, I'm assuming he's talking about Good Kid, Mad City as the first one, and then going on from there. It's interesting because J. Cole always does this sort of thing where he praises, but then also discourages you and criticizes you, kind of like a manager would. But he's essentially saying like, yeah, you were great on Good Kid, Mad City, but Mr. Morale, that wasn't it. And then the issue that a lot of people have is with the next line where he says, your second shit put people to sleep, but they gassed it. This is in regards to Pimp a Butterfly, which got a lot of praise when it came out. I mean, it won a Pulitzer and everything. So like, it's very highly regarded, but he's basically saying like, yo, people weren't really fucking with it. Like, and I understand what he means because he could be talking more so about the target audience. The target audience that Kendrick was aiming for might not have messed with it as much as the artsy people. Like people who are, coming off of Good Kid, Mad City, they're kind of expecting this more like kind of conscious street rap, I guess. They weren't expecting this. So they were like, yeah, we're going to listen to it because it's Kendrick, but we don't really care, or it's like it doesn't really connect with them. Then continuing on these shots at Kendrick's music, his career, and whatever, Cole mentions how he averaging one hard burst like every 30 months or something. And if he wasn't dissing, then we wouldn't be discussing him. If he wasn't dissing, no one would be discussing him, which is pretty valid in most cases, I feel, because honestly, Kendrick doesn't come out very often, and when he does, it's really like once every 30 months. Like he doesn't work with a whole lot of people. Like he'll do a feature here and there, but it's not a common occurrence. And out of those verses that he does, not all of them hit, especially when you consider that J. Cole's feature run has been one of the most consistent of all times. I mean, he's been doing these features since 2018 or so, and I don't think he's really missed one yet. Like, he's been solid pretty much across the board. We then also get a beat switch to a Conductor Williams beat, conductor, which I took to signify J. Cole's alliance with Drake, just because obviously 8 AM in Charlotte, but also the other songs that were Conductor Williams produced on the For All the Dogs extended version, whatever it's called. The second verse might get a little overlooked though as well, because it feels a bit slower, and it's not as like aggressive and in your face, I suppose. Like, it's a little bit smoother. But we do still have some allusions to Kendrick here with "Your arms might be too short to box with the God," which is a play on Kendrick being shorter than Cole. Kind of, like he said, fuck the big three, it's just big me. Kendrick is the shortest by far of all three of them. Whatever. But this also has J. Cole positioning himself as a higher level than Kendrick. And, obviously saying that he is God level rapping, essentially. Which could also go into Kendrick's constant biblical and religious references throughout his music career and just in general. He then also goes on to mention that who live his life without the pressures of a constant facade. I pray for peace, but if a nigga sees these positive vibes. J. Cole has never had to put on a facade of being peaceful and positive, because that's just how he is. He doesn't have to fake it, which could go into Kendrick. Maybe Kendrick isn't this positive figure that everyone seems to think that he is. Maybe he is just kind of a jerk. I don't know. I mean, we've kind of gotten some idea of that with his burner account on Instagram, whatever. But maybe he has a different side to him that isn't publicly portrayed all the time. But then throughout this verse and the rest of the track as well, actually, we see J. Cole mentioning how he's kind of holding himself back because he's got love and respect for Kendrick. I'm hesitant, I love my brother, but I'm not gonna lie. I'm powered up for real, that shit would feel like swatting a fly. But he also does acknowledge that if this sort of back and forth is what Kendrick wants, and really, if anyone else wants this sort of smoke, they'll get it. Shit, if this is what you want, I'm indulging in violence. These shots that are thrown really aren't anything crazy, similar to how Kendrick's verse was pretty chill. Like, it was more of just like a playful jab just to see if the other person is properly willing to spar. But yeah. But then he also ends the verse by saying that he could drop 2 classics right now. Why don't you just do it then? Why don't you just do it? Just do it. Just fucking do it.
Then fucking do it. Do it, you little bitch. Jesus Christ.
Now that we got that track out of the way, I mentioned that there were some other shots and mentions thrown out throughout the project. Realistically, some of these could be reaches, and I probably missed some, but this is what I've got. Especially, because I don't know how long this project has been in the works. I don't know how much of each track was done. There's a lot of things in play here. So, starting off with the track Crocodile Tears, this was a song that was previewed on volume 1 of my Delete Later. He says on the actual song, they sound faded, downgraded, they Pluto, which could be a shot at Future because of the whole We Don't Trust You album and whatnot. But again, it's hard to say if this track was actually done before all this beef, and if it's just like a play on the planet Pluto and not the person Pluto, because the snippet just ends right before that line. And then on the track Sticks and Stones, he might have alluded to Travis Scott and a few other rappers with the "My number ones come from albums, theirs is burgers and fries to go," which, if you remember, Travis Scott, Cardi B, and a few other rappers had like their McDonald's meals. So, that is their way of staying relevant in his mind, rather than just focusing on the music. It doesn't specifically have to be about Travis Scott, but it wouldn't be that surprising if we are to go with the whole everyone that was on We Don't Trust You is an enemy now sort of thing, because he was on it. And then on the track Pie, ignoring the fact that both Daylight and Soul are on a track with J. Cole, while their colleague Kendrick is beefing with him, Cole goes on to mention his album drop, it was trash. Again, Could be about anybody, but given the current circumstances, it wouldn't be surprising if it was to be about Kendrick. He also does mention a transgender man, which could be in reference to Auntie Diaries, but we'll just kind of leave it there. He does also then mention karate chops, which initially when I heard it, I just took to be a Kung Fu Kenny line, but looking back at it, it could just be a random one-off line. We do get potentially more Kendrick references with Stealth Mode, where J. Cole mentions rats in the building in the chorus, and how he's considered extending an olive branch to rebuild bridges with people that have burned them. So, Kendrick trying to burn these bridges, and maybe Kendrick's being the rat. I don't know. Like, that might be a bit of a stretch because I don't consider Kendrick to be a rat in most cases. I don't know if he has anything to snitch about. And then he also mentions at the end of his verse, when you up at the top is covered his spot, which could still be just further first-person shooter things where he's, comparing himself to the other two and saying that he is at his prime. He is number one right now. But it could also just be in reference to what Kendrick said. But that's pretty much all I got for what I've listened to so far. Sure, there's probably more to it, but that's where we'll leave it for now. Overall, I have enjoyed the project, and I do see myself listening to it a few more times, at least over the next month or so. But as I was listening to it, a thought came to mind, and it was that whenever J. Cole drops, I'm really into the album and the music and really just everything for a week or so. But after that, it almost entirely leaves my mind. And I'm not sure if that's because I oversaturate my listening experience with it, like just only listen to that and nothing else, or if it just doesn't have the lasting power for me. Just something that came to mind. And to be fair, this happens with Kendrick too. So it's not a whole Kendrick versus J. Cole thing. It's just, I don't know what it is. But in any case, I'm definitely excited to see where things go from here, because it really does feel like they're both trying to play. Like, I don't know where it's going to go. Like, I don't think it's going to be like proper rap beef where they're going to go at each other's necks, but I think it might go more of like playful fighting. Like, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't expect Drake to ever say anything. I think he's just gonna leave it there. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the project so far, because I've rambled long enough. And while you're down there, why don't you like and subscribe to see more rambling and content like this? Thank you for watching, and please stay safe out there.